The Quiet Stranger. It was a chilly Wednesday morning in downtown Los Angeles. The sun had just started to stretch over the skyline, painting golden streaks across the still sleepy streets. Most stores hadn't opened yet, but one small, independent clothing boutique called Urban Soul was already buzzing with energy. Inside, the smell of fresh fabric, a hint of lavender, and brewed coffee lingered in the air. The owner, Marcus Langston, a sharply dressed man in his late 40s, stood behind the register flipping through the day's inventory sheet. He prided himself on running a high-end boutique, known for its minimalist aesthetic and expensive taste. Marcus had built his brand with precision, and his customer base was composed mostly of local influencers, fashion editors, and celebrities who frequented the area. As the clock struck 9:00 a.m., the bell above the front door jingled. A man stepped in, tall, lean, wearing a worn-out baseball cap, faded jeans, and a black hoodie. His beard was scruffy, and he looked like he hadn't shaved in days. He had a soft, thoughtful gaze, almost melancholic, and he walked slowly, his hands tucked into his hoodie's pockets. Marcus looked up and immediately scowled. He didn't recognize the man. And worse, he didn't look like someone who could afford anything in his store. "Can I help you?" Marcus asked, forcing a smile that barely hid his disapproval. The man paused. "Just browsing," he said, his voice gentle, almost calming. Marcus nodded, but his eyes never left the stranger. He watched as the man moved slowly between racks, his fingers grazing the fabric with appreciation. The stranger didn't rush, didn't fidget. He moved with intention, as if he was searching for something, or maybe just taking it all in. After several minutes, Marcus's patience wore thin. "Sir, just so you're aware, this is a designer boutique. Everything here is original, handcrafted, and—" "I understand," the man interrupted softly, looking Marcus in the eye. "I appreciate craftsmanship." Marcus blinked, caught off guard by the calm confidence in the stranger's tone. "Still," he pressed, "we're not a thrift shop. If you're looking for cheaper options, there's a place 2 blocks down that might suit your budget better." The store went quiet. The only sound was the low hum of ambient music playing through the speakers. The man said nothing. He simply nodded, took one more look around, and walked toward the exit. As he reached for the door, he turned back and said with a kind smile, "Thanks for the recommendation." And just like that, he was gone. Marcus exhaled, rolling his eyes. "Unbelievable," he muttered. "These people think they can just walk in anywhere." What Marcus didn't realize was that the quiet stranger who had just left was Keanu Reeves, the world-famous actor, philanthropist, and the new silent partner in Urban Soul's parent company. Earlier, Keanu sat in a boardroom at the top of a modern skyscraper in West Hollywood. The room was sleek, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city. Dressed modestly as always, a blazer over a t-shirt and jeans, he listened as the CEO of the retail conglomerate Vesta Lifestyle Group gave a presentation. "And this brings us to Urban Soul," the CEO said, clicking to the next slide. "Boutique, edgy, and profitable. But we've received reports of inconsistent customer service, especially toward individuals who don't fit their target demographic." Keanu leaned forward slightly. He had recently invested in the group as part of his passion for supporting ethical businesses and promoting kindness in commerce. While he rarely involved himself in the day-to-day, something about Urban Soul piqued his interest. "What do you mean by inconsistent service?" Keanu asked. The room quieted. A junior executive cleared her throat. "There have been complaints, mostly unverified, that the store discriminates based on appearance. For example, individuals who appear homeless or working class are treated poorly or ignored." Keanu rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "Is the owner aware?" he asked. "Marcus? Possibly," the CEO replied. "But he's proud. He thinks he's protecting the brand." Keanu was silent for a long moment. Then, Almost offhandedly, he said, "I'd like to visit the store." Quietly. No press. No heads up. The team exchanged glances. "Understood," the CEO said. Back to the end. After leaving Urban Soul, Keanu walked 3 blocks to a small cafe. He sat by the window, sipping on green tea, staring thoughtfully into the distance. He wasn't angry, not in the traditional sense. Keanu had seen enough of the world to know that people made assumptions based on appearance all the time. But what bothered him was the lost opportunity, the chance to extend kindness, connection, or even simple respect to another human being. He jotted a note in his journal, something he always carried. Kindness shouldn't be based on perception. It should be a constant, like gravity. He made a quiet decision then and there. He would continue visiting Urban Soul, each time slightly differently. Each time, he would observe, not to expose or embarrass, but to understand. He wanted to know, was Marcus just having a bad day? Or was this a pattern? The next visit. 4 days later, Keanu returned. This time, he wore a slightly different outfit, a clean white tee, fitted denim jacket, and well-worn boots. He looked a bit more polished, but still not flashy. Again, Marcus barely looked up when he entered. This time, another customer was in the store, a young woman in her 20s with pink hair and tattoos. She smiled at Keanu, who smiled back. As the woman approached the counter with a top to purchase, she asked, "Hey, do you have this in medium?" Marcus took the top from her and looked down his nose. "That style isn't really designed for your frame," he said dismissively. The woman blinked, hurt flashing in her eyes. "Excuse me." "It's a very tailored fit," Marcus said, turning to the register. "Might not be flattering." Keanu felt something twist in his gut. As the woman put the shirt down and turned to leave, Keanu caught her near the door and said kindly, "That shirt would look amazing on you. Don't let someone who's forgotten how to see people make you doubt yourself." She smiled, visibly moved. "Thank you. That means a lot." Keanu turned and looked back at Marcus, who was now watching him more closely. There was a flicker of recognition in Marcus's eyes. Something about the man seemed familiar, but he couldn't quite place it. Later at Gate in Night, Marcus sat in his apartment, scrolling through Netflix. As he browsed, a thumbnail popped up, John Wick. He paused. The image stared back at him. Slowly, his eyes widened. "No way," he whispered. "That guy. That was Keanu Reeves." He jumped up, pacing. "Did I just?" No. Couldn't be. But it was. And Keanu wasn't done yet. The mirror doesn't lie. Sometimes we meet people who remind us of who we were before we forgot to be kind. 3 days later, the boutique was quiet that morning. A gray drizzle blurred the windows of Urban Soul, and Marcus Langston, as always, was behind the counter, coffee in one hand, the other flipping through a fashion catalog. The usual curated jazz played in the background, though even that couldn't mask the tension beginning to stir in Marcus's mind. He hadn't stopped thinking about the stranger, the man who walked in twice, quiet, polite, curious. And yet, something about him was haunting. It was his eyes. Those eyes didn't belong to a drifter or someone casually browsing. They held weight, wisdom. And now Marcus couldn't shake the growing suspicion that he had made a monumental mistake. He opened Google and hesitantly typed, "Keanu Reeves Casual Clothes 2025. Image after image appeared. Soft hoodies, denim jackets, modest sneakers. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't the type to walk into a store demanding attention. The man could have been Keanu. But what would he be doing in his little boutique? Marcus shook his head and shut the laptop. Ridiculous, he muttered. Even if it was him, why would he care? But deep inside, Marcus knew something was shifting. And Keanu. He had already planned his third visit. 3 floors below GTAE surface. Across town, Inside a quiet office tucked behind a local bookstore, Keanu sat across from a middle-aged woman with a kind face and silver streaks in her hair. Her name was Clara, a former retail manager turned small business consultant. Keanu had worked with her on several community projects that supported ethical customer service training. She placed a steaming cup of chai in front of him. "So tell me, what's bothering you?" Keanu smiled, appreciative. "There's a store I invested in. Boutique, successful. But something's off." "Off how?" she asked, taking a sip of her drink. He leaned back in his chair. "The owner sees people as price tags. If someone doesn't look like they can afford to shop there, he treats them like they don't exist." Clara nodded knowingly. "Ah, the profiling principle. Ugly little habit, very common in exclusive spaces." Keanu looked down. "I walked in looking like anyone else. Twice. The second time, I watched him humiliate a customer, a woman who didn't look like his idea of stylish. He made her feel invisible." "Did you say anything?" "I told her she looked great," Keanu said softly, "but I didn't confront him. Not yet." Clara leaned forward. "You don't need to shame him, but you can hold up a mirror. Some people need to see themselves through someone else's eyes to realize what they've become." The past, neverforgets. Meanwhile, Marcus Langston sat in the back room of Urban Soul, staring at an old photo on his office shelf. It was nearly a decade old. Him and his brother, James, standing in front of a tiny street stall with a handmade sign. Langston's Threads. They had started from nothing. No loans, no support. Just a dream and second-hand sewing machines. James had been the heart, the one who smiled, talked to everyone, and treated every customer like royalty. He was the one who said things like, "People don't remember what you sell them, Marcus. They remember how you make them feel." But James had passed away 5 years ago in a motorcycle accident. Since then, Marcus had changed. The world had changed him, hardened him. He believed he was protecting the legacy by keeping the brand exclusive. That's what success meant now, being above. But now something didn't feel right. And it was all because of one quiet man with thoughtful eyes. The third visit. It was a Friday. The store was busier than usual, the rain gone and the sun coaxing people onto the streets. Keanu entered once again, this time in business casual, pressed chinos, a clean button-up, hair tied back neatly. He looked like a writer or a professor. Marcus spotted him immediately. His breath caught in his throat. It was him. No mistake this time. Keanu offered a polite smile, nodded, and began browsing again. Same calm presence, same gentle respect for the space. But Marcus didn't approach him this time. He was too stunned. Keanu picked up a black tailored jacket, felt the stitching, and then walked over to the fitting room. Marcus watched him go, frozen. Inside the fitting room, Keanu tried on the jacket and stared at himself in the mirror. It was sharp, clean lines, perfect stitching. But what he saw wasn't fabric. He saw a reflection of how people are treated based on the clothes they wear. He stepped out. A young associate named Ella approached. "That looks amazing on you," she said kindly. Keanu smiled. "Thank you. Do you know who designed this?" Ella lit up. "Actually, yes. It's a local artist from East LA, Marcus. The owner discovered her. He's been trying to support her brand. It's one of the good things he does." That surprised Keanu. "Really?" he asked. "Yeah. He doesn't tell people, doesn't advertise it. But every season, he sponsors a few unknowns. He helped me pay for design school." Keanu paused. There was more to Marcus than he realized. The privatesion. After making a small purchase, Keanu walked toward the door. Marcus, still wrestling with what to say, finally called out, "Wait, sir." Keanu turned around. Marcus cleared his throat. "You've been here before." "Yes," Keanu said calmly. Marcus nodded. "I didn't treat you well. The first time." Keanu didn't speak. He just waited. Marcus fidgeted. I made assumptions. I've been doing that a lot. I think I've forgotten something important. Keanu tilted his head, encouraging him to continue. My brother used to run this with me. He was the soul of the place. He passed, and somewhere along the way, I turned this store into a fortress. To protect it. To protect myself. Keanu stepped closer. You lost someone, and you tried to protect what he loved. Marcus nodded, swallowing hard. But in the process, Keanu said gently, you started pushing away the very people he would have welcomed in. Marcus looked down. I did. Keanu offered his hand. Maybe it's time to rebuild, with both the heart and the brand. Marcus shook it. Neither said another word, but everything had changed. The big reveal. The next morning, Marcus opened his email to find a message from Vesta Lifestyle Group. It read, your silent partner would like to schedule a private meeting with you regarding the future of Urban Soul. Confidential. Discretion advised. Attached was a name. Keanu Reeves. Marcus stared at the screen for nearly 5 minutes. Then he laughed, a deep, nervous laugh. He had tried to teach a lesson in class to a man who wrote the curriculum of life. When truth sits across the table, a single honest conversation can rebuild what years of silence destroyed. 2 days later, 10:00 a.m., West Hollywood. Marcus Langston had never been this nervous in his life. Not when he first opened his boutique. Not even when he lost his brother. He sat in the sleek lobby of the Vesta Lifestyle Group's headquarters, his leg bouncing anxiously, hands clenched around a cup of lukewarm coffee. The receptionist had kindly offered him a bottle of still water, but his throat was too dry to drink it. He couldn't believe the email had been real. Keanu Reeves, the Keanu Reeves, was his silent partner. The same man he'd dismissed, humiliated, and written off as a nobody just days ago. What could he possibly say? Across from him, the elevator dinged softly. Out stepped Keanu. Dressed in a simple navy shirt, soft gray blazer, and well-worn boots, he moved like water, calm, steady, grounded. Their eyes met. Marcus stood abruptly, knocking the water bottle off the table. It rolled under the chair. Keanu smiled gently. Morning. Marcus struggled for words. Mr. Reeves. I didn't. Keanu raised a hand, cutting the tension like a scalpel. Call me Keanu. Let's talk. The private room. The two men entered a glass-walled conference room high above the city. The view of Los Angeles stretched out endlessly, sunlight reflecting off glass towers and palm trees swaying below. A quiet moment passed. Keanu pulled out a chair for Marcus, then sat across from him. He didn't open a laptop, didn't pull out notes. He just waited. Marcus cleared his throat. I owe you an apology. Keanu nodded. Yes, but let's start with a conversation instead. Marcus was caught off guard. You're not angry. I've seen enough anger in this world, Keanu said softly. I'd rather understand. That one sentence dropped like a stone in Marcus's chest. He inhaled sharply. This man, this world-famous actor, investor, and icon, wasn't here to humiliate him or take the store away. He was here to listen, and that made it harder. The truth behind the boutique. Marcus took a deep breath and leaned forward. When we started Urban Soul, my brother and I, we were nobodies. James was the people person. He talked to everyone. Treated a homeless man with the same respect he'd give to a fashion editor. He believed in beauty, not labels. Keanu listened, unwavering. But after he died, I started seeing everything as a threat. Knockoff brands, online shopping, people who walked in and didn't look like they belonged. I thought they'd ruin the image. I thought I was protecting something sacred. He paused. But I forgot why we started it in the first place. Keanu sat quietly for a moment, then said, Protecting what we love sometimes blinds us to the people who need it most. Marcus nodded slowly. That day you walked in, I saw a stranger who didn't fit. Not the man who helped fund the store. Not the artist. Just someone I didn't want there. Keanu didn't gloat. He didn't lecture. Instead, he leaned in. I'm not here to take it away from you, he said gently. I'm here because I believe this place can be better. And I think deep down, you believe that too. A purpose, unlike any other. Marcus looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. You really think it can be fixed? Not just fixed, Keanu said. Transformed. He reached into his bag and slid a folder across the table. Inside were sketches, layouts, concepts. Marcus flipped through them. New displays, a welcoming coffee nook, a small corner showcasing local emerging artists, and an annual compassion campaign that offered free clothing and styling for those in need, no questions asked. This, Marcus whispered, stunned. This is what your brother would have dreamed of, Keanu finished. Marcus's hands trembled. You've been preparing this, he asked. I have people who help. Designers, architects, storytellers. But I only do this kind of thing if the heart of the place is ready to change. Marcus met his eyes. I'm ready. I want this. Not just for the brand, but for the people. Keanu smiled, a weight lifting from the room. Then let's begin. Back at the boutique, day 1 of change. 3 days later, Urban Soul temporarily closed its doors for what the public assumed was a renovation. But behind the scenes, something far deeper was happening. Keanu arrived early that morning. Sleeves rolled up, no entourage. Marcus was already there, sweeping the entrance himself. They worked side by side. Moved mannequins, rearranged displays, sanded down old shelving and replaced it with reclaimed wood from a local carpentry workshop. Ella, the associate, joined them too. And by noon, several neighborhood volunteers had come in. Some of them former customers who had once been treated coldly, but now felt a strange sense of belonging again. The air in the store had shifted. Warmer, brighter, lighter. It wasn't about fashion anymore. It was about people. The core and air that changed the right. In one corner of the store was transformed into a storytelling wall. Keanu's idea. Customers and guests were invited to write a short message on small white tiles. A time someone made you feel seen. A time you helped someone with no expectation. A moment of unexpected kindness. Marcus stared at the growing collection in awe. One tile read, "A stranger once told me I looked beautiful when I was crying in a changing room. I still carry that with me." Another said, "A man in a hoodie made me feel human when I was invisible to everyone else." Keanu read that one in silence and smiled. A mysterious customer returns. 1 week later, during the soft relaunch of Urban Soul, a woman with pink hair walked in again, the same one Marcus had once dismissed. This time, she was greeted warmly by Ella and offered tea from the new welcome bar. Marcus approached her personally, a little nervous. "I remember you," he said quietly. "I was unkind before. I'm sorry." She looked surprised, then softened. "You look different." "I feel different," he said. She smiled. "Well, I'm glad you're still here. I loved this place before. Now I think I love what it's becoming." She picked up a shirt, the same one from before, and asked, "Do you have this in medium?" Marcus grinned. "Let me go check in the back." STUNNET CEO. Back at Vesta's corporate office, the CEO read the weekly performance report with raised eyebrows. Urban Soul, despite being closed for almost 2 weeks, had received more foot traffic and online engagement in the last 5 days than it had in the previous 2 months combined. One reviewer wrote, "The store looks the same, but it feels different. It's like someone put a soul in Urban Soul." and the CEO knew exactly who that someone was. A final scene. Under these stairs. That evening, Marcus and Keanu sat on a bench outside the store, sipping tea. The sidewalk was quiet, the boutique softly glowing behind them. "Thank you," Marcus said. Keanu shook his head. "I didn't do it. You did. You chose to change. That's the hard part." Marcus looked up at the stars. "It's funny. I used to think success meant exclusivity. Now I think it might just mean inclusion." Keanu smiled. "Maybe success isn't what we build for ourselves. It's what we leave behind for others." They sat in silence, a peace settling between them. One stranger had walked into a store, treated like he didn't belong. Now, that same store would become a haven for anyone who felt the same. The ripple effect. When one person chooses kindness, they light a candle. But when others follow, they light a sky full of stars. One no until later. The Ninu Urban Soul. A gentle breeze carried the smell of roasted espresso beans from the corner cafe down the sidewalk of Ventura Boulevard. The morning sun painted long shadows across the boutique windows, and just inside the newly renovated glass doors, Urban Soul pulsed with quiet energy. Gone were the stiff mannequins posed in filtered silence. Gone were the stark, elite displays and cold lighting. In their place, warmth, humanity. A rotating wall of handwritten kindness tiles now spanned the back entrance. The dressing rooms had soft lighting, calming music, and affirmation cards hanging from tiny clothespins on string. You are enough. Style doesn't define you. You define style. Seen, valued, always. The store now hosted Compassion Fridays, where anyone could come in, no purchase necessary, and get style consultations, try-ons, and even take home a free outfit if they needed one. No IDs, no questions, just love. The first time Marcus watched someone walk in with worn shoes and leave with a bag full of clothes and tears in their eyes, something in him healed. He now smiled more, listened more, and each day, as customers walked out the door, something invisible left with them, a new sense of dignity. But what Marcus didn't expect was how quickly the world would respond. We in the world stay artists to notice. It began with a single blog post from a lifestyle influencer who had visited on a whim. I walked into Urban Soul expecting clothes. I left with hope. A man gave me free tea, helped me pick out a jacket, and when I said I couldn't afford it yet, he said, "That's okay. Come back when you're ready. We're still glad you're here." The post went viral within hours. Within days, TikTok creators, vloggers, and micro-influencers began arriving in waves. But this wasn't for clout. They came because they felt something genuine. And behind all of it stood Marcus Langston, the once hardened, perfectionist store owner who now asked customers how their day was before asking what they were buying. The man who would walk an elderly visitor across the street after they left the store. The man who, now and then, would step into the dressing rooms simply to hang up affirmation cards with his own handwritten messages. One read, "I used to think fashion was everything. Then I realized it's just a mirror. You are the masterpiece. Marcus." A chain reaction. Soon, other boutiques started asking questions. Owners of neighboring stores, once aloof or competitive, quietly stepped inside Urban Soul to observe. One by one, they noticed something shocking. The sales had gone up, not down. In a world where kindness was often mistaken for weakness, Urban Soul proved that compassion could be a business strategy, and a sustainable one. Inspired by Marcus's transformation, nearby stores launched their own small initiatives. A bookstore added a "Take a book, leave a book" corner. A cafe began a Pay It Forward board where customers could pre-purchase coffees for strangers. A shoe shop introduced free laces and shoe polish for unhoused visitors. The community began transforming, not from the top down, but from the inside out. And the epicenter of that shift, a man who once judged strangers by their shoes. The teist, the return of power. But just as light attracts attention, it also casts shadows. One Wednesday morning, Marcus received a call from Lauren West, the regional director of Vesta Lifestyle Group, and Keanu's longtime business liaison. "Marcus, good morning," she said briskly. "We need to talk. There's been pushback." "Pushback?" Marcus asked, confused. "Corporate partners, a few investors. Some believe the new direction of Urban Soul doesn't reflect the luxury image they signed on for. They're threatening to pull out." Marcus felt his stomach twist. Lauren continued, "They think you're giving too much away, losing exclusivity. They're calling it emotional branding gone rogue." He almost laughed, but it wasn't funny. It was real. "What does Keanu think?" he asked carefully. Lauren was quiet. "He's asked me not to interfere yet. He wants you to respond, to decide how you want to handle it." The words echoed. He wants you to respond. Not Keanu. Not corporate. You. The beau or du homme. A different Marcus. 2 days later, Marcus found himself seated at a long, dark walnut table surrounded by skeptical investors and brand consultants. He was no longer wearing a designer suit. Instead, he wore a linen button-up, rolled sleeves, and no tie. The same clothes he wore every day at the store now. Comfortable. Honest. A man across from him, sharply dressed and ice-eyed, leaned forward. "Mr. Langston, this transformation might feel noble, but this is retail. What you're doing is not scalable, not profitable in the long run." Marcus didn't flinch. Another consultant added, "You've gone from boutique to social experiment. Is that really what Urban Soul is now?" Marcus stood up slowly. "I used to think like you," he began. "I used to think exclusivity was the future. That if someone didn't look the part, they didn't belong in the story I was writing." He looked around the room. "But what I've learned is that everyone wants to belong somewhere. And when you create a place where people feel seen, they don't just shop, they believe. They share, they return." He pulled a folder from his bag and handed it out. Inside were recent numbers. Sales up by 17%, foot traffic up by 43%, and repeat visits doubled. But more than the stats, Marcus pointed to a separate document, hundreds of printed customer messages pulled from the kindness wall. "Read these," he said. "You'll understand why this works." The room was silent. Then a slow clap came from the corner. Keanu Reeves had entered quietly sometime during Marcus's speech. He leaned against the wall, watching, smiling. "Well said," Keanu murmured. "A decision of faith." By the end of the meeting, not every investor was convinced. A few still walked away. But the ones who stayed, they were the ones who saw something more valuable than margins, legacy. Keanu approached Marcus as the room cleared. "You handled that like a leader," he said. Marcus smiled. "You gave me the chance. You let me mess up, change, grow." Keanu looked out the window. "That's the thing about second chances. You never know who someone might become." The heart of the city. Months passed. Urban Soul had now become more than a boutique. It was a movement. Other cities began reaching out. Keanu and Marcus worked quietly behind the scenes to help consult on new stores that prioritized community as much as commerce. A docuseries was quietly being filmed, capturing real people's stories inside the boutique. No scripts, no acting, just humanity. And then came the day Marcus found a letter left anonymously in the store. It read, "Dear Urban Soul, I'm 16. I've never felt beautiful. I walked in because I saw your wall. I left with a dress, and I think maybe I like the person I saw in the mirror today. Thank you for giving me back to myself." Marcus read it twice. Then he framed it, hung it right at the entrance, next to the door, where everyone could see. The man behind the silence, Sometimes the kindest souls are forged in fire, and sometimes the quietest ones carry the loudest stories. The present, a late-night walk. It was past midnight in Los Angeles. The streets were quieter now, humming with distant traffic and the soft click of heels on concrete. Urban Soul was closed for the night, its glowing sign reflected in puddles left by an early evening drizzle. Inside the boutique, Marcus Langston was alone, folding a few last garments, humming quietly to himself. He glanced at the framed letter hanging near the door, the one from the 16-year-old girl who had written that the mirror made her feel beautiful again. That letter had changed him, but he often thought about what, or who, had changed Keanu. Marcus had seen glimpses, of course. Keanu rarely spoke about himself, but when he did, it was always with humility and depth. So one day, Marcus asked him, "Why this? Why me? You could invest in anything, but you chose this little shop. You helped me. Why?" Keanu had paused, then said simply, "Because someone once helped me when I was invisible." Flashback, Toronto, 1980. Teenage Keanu Reeves sat on a worn park bench in the middle of a brisk autumn afternoon, his skateboard resting at his feet. He was just 15, lanky and awkward, dressed in a second-hand army coat that was 2 sizes too big. His mother was working long shifts to support them. His father, gone. His sister, Kim, was battling leukemia. Hospital visits, chemotherapy, and long nights had become their rhythm. But that day, he'd skipped school. Again. He couldn't focus, couldn't pretend. What was the point of reading Shakespeare when your little sister was losing her hair? He watched strangers walk by, couples, businessmen, kids eating ice cream, and he had never felt more alone. A man approached, middle-aged, holding a brown paper bag, clearly not well off himself. His coat was frayed, and his shoes were patched. But he smiled kindly. "Mind if I sit?" Keanu shrugged. The man sat down, opened the bag, and pulled out 2 bagels. He held one out. Keanu hesitated. "Why?" "Because you look like you haven't been offered something in a while." Keanu slowly accepted it. They sat in silence, chewing. Eventually, the man said, "Bad day." Keanu nodded. The man didn't press, didn't lecture. He just sat there, present, unassuming, human. Before leaving, the man said, "You never know. Maybe one day you'll sit on a bench and pass the kindness on." Keanu never forgot him. The JOSTs that shape U.S. Years later, when his sister Kim miraculously went into remission, Keanu began working odd jobs to help pay the bills. He'd started acting, slowly gaining traction, but never forgot the weight of those hard years. And then came the losses. First, River Phoenix, his best friend. Then, his unborn daughter with Jennifer Syme. Then Jennifer herself, lost in a car crash just months later. Each tragedy carved a deeper space inside him, a space that could have easily become bitterness. But Keanu chose something else. He chose compassion. Silence, not anger. Giving, not taking. And slowly, he built a life anchored not in fame, but in empathy. He drove himself, lived modestly, gave generously, because he knew what it was like to be unseen. And that's why Urban Soul mattered. Back to the present, a gentile revel. Marcus sat across from Keanu days later, both holding coffee cups, steam rising between them. They were in a small cafe tucked between 2 alleys, quiet, old, with vintage chairs and faded wall art. Marcus asked, "Was that story real?" The man on the bench. Keanu nodded slowly. His name was Charlie. He gave me half a sandwich once, too. I think he knew I needed more than food. Marcus leaned back. "So that's why you helped me?" "No," Keanu said gently. "I helped you because you wanted to change. I just gave you space to see yourself again." They sat in silence for a moment, the kind only shared by people who understand each other's pain. Then Keanu continued, "But yes, Charlie was my first investor, not in money, in humanity. A-N-U-U-A-N-I-T. Charlie's Coroner." Inspired by Keanu's story, Marcus proposed a new addition to the store, a small reading and rest corner for anyone needing shelter, reflection, or silence. It had a bookshelf filled with donated books, free hot tea and water, a wall of notes simply labeled, "From one soul to another." They named it Charlie's Corner. People came in who weren't even shopping. They came to read, to cry, to sit. And no one rushed them. No one asked them to leave. No one judged their shoes. And somehow, the boutique's soul kept growing. A media wave. The store caught national attention after a journalist from a major publication walked in undercover. He had dressed in torn jeans and a hoodie, expecting another luxury shop to dismiss him. Instead, Ella handed him a cup of tea, asked how his day was, and invited him to sit at Charlie's Corner. The headline the next day read, "The Boutique That Sees You. How Urban Soul is Redefining Luxury Through Humanity." TV shows, morning news, podcasts, they all reached out. But Keanu declined every interview. He told Marcus, "Let the story speak. We don't need to." A strange package. One morning, a small box arrived at the store addressed to Keanu and Marcus. Inside was a weathered army coat and a short note. "Keanu, I found this in my father's things after he passed. He told me once that he met a boy on a bench and shared a bagel with him. I never knew what it meant until now. Charlie Jr." Keanu sat down and held the coat gently. No words, just tears. Marcus placed the coat in a frame. It now hangs above Charlie's Corner, surrounded by handwritten messages from strangers whose lives were changed, not by what they bought, but how they were treated. A simple truth. Urban Soul was now more than a store. It was a sanctuary, a quiet rebellion against judgment, a testimony that you can turn grief into growth, and that the smallest acts of kindness, a smile, a bagel, a seat on a bench, can echo across generations. One man passed it on. Another man rebuilt his life because of it. And the world was watching. The storm before the light. Your greatest test often arrives the moment you think you've finally found peace. The community years. Urban Soul had become more than a boutique. By now, it was a kind of sacred space, a beacon in a city where most things moved too fast to notice a broken heart or a silent cry. Its kindness wall had over 2,000 tiles now, filled with handwritten stories from all walks of life. Charlie's Corner was regularly visited by everyone from college students dealing with anxiety to elderly neighbors seeking human connection. There was something healing about the store. It didn't try to fix people. It just let them be. And that was enough. So when Marcus announced the Soulful Voices Night, an open mic evening for storytelling, poetry, and music, the entire block responded with electric anticipation. Keanu, as usual, kept it low-key. He would be there, but not on stage. Not yet. A night to remember. It was a Friday evening in early spring. String lights danced above the boutique's newly extended outdoor patio. Candles flickered in recycled glass jars. Folding chairs lined up in semicircles welcomed strangers and friends alike. Ella, the assistant-turned-manager, kicked off the night with a poem she had written about growing up in a home where silence was punishment, and how Urban Soul taught her that silence could also be sanctuary. A young father read a letter he had written to his teenage daughter, apologizing for the years he hadn't been emotionally present. And a woman in a headscarf told the story of being denied service at 3 boutiques before walking into Urban Soul and hearing someone say, "You're safe here." Each story was a tiny revolution. And then came the last performance of the night. A surprise. A man, mid-40s, walked on stage. His posture was straight, military-like, and his voice was low. "I don't do poetry," he said, "but I do know regret." The crowd went silent. He looked around, swallowing hard. "My name is Mark. 2 years ago, I was the district manager of a major luxury retail chain. We prided ourselves on efficiency and exclusivity." He chuckled bitterly. "One day, I saw a man walk in, dressed in jeans, quiet, humble. I told the store associate to keep an eye on him. She did." He paused. He was gone before we realized who he was. Turns out, he was Keanu Reeves. A wave of recognition passed through the audience. All eyes turned to Keanu, sitting in the third row, still and humble. Mark looked at him. "I judged you, I profiled you, and I carried that shame with me for a long time. But when I heard what you and Marcus built here, I came. I sat in that corner," he pointed to Charlie's corner, "and for the first time, I didn't feel like a villain." His voice cracked. "I just wanted to say, thank you." Keanu stood quietly, walked over, and hugged him. The entire crowd rose to their feet. No applause, just reverence. The EVRYTing. 3 days later, a major daytime talk show requested an interview. They wanted Marcus and Keanu. At first, Keanu declined. But Marcus, encouraged by Ella and the growing team, said yes. "If we're trying to create something different," he told Keanu, "we can't stay hidden forever." So they agreed, but on one condition. The interview would be filmed inside Urban Soul. No soundstage, no set, just truth in the space where truth lived. The cameras rolled on a Tuesday morning. Soft, natural light flooded the boutique. The host, famous, polished, charismatic, sat across from Keanu and Marcus at the corner table beside the kindness wall. "Keanu," she began, "you could have chosen any project. But you chose this, a little store. Why?" Keanu looked into the camera, voice gentle. "Because I remember what it feels like to be overlooked. And I believe that kindness shouldn't be a luxury product." The audience, watching live, erupted online. Comments flooded in. "I've never cried during a business interview before. This is what real influence looks like. This store should be a movement." But not everyone was moved. The BACKLASH. Within 24 hours, social media split. Some luxury influencers and fashion critics accused Urban Soul of weaponizing poverty for clout, claiming the story was a publicity stunt. A rival chain posted a sarcastic video mocking the kindness wall. They called it cringe retail therapy, and an anonymous article was published with the headline, "Keanu's Heartwarming Boutique," or guilt-washed branding. Marcus was devastated. He had poured his soul into this, but Keanu stayed calm. "It was never going to be easy," he told Marcus. "Anything that disrupts the norm gets pushback." Still, Marcus struggled. Were they wrong? Was it too much? Were they trying to save the world with handwritten notes and free tea? Then, one afternoon, a man walked into the store, dressed neatly, with a slight limp. He asked to speak to Marcus. "I wanted to tell you," he said. "I read that article. I believed it." Marcus braced. "But something told me to come anyway. My wife passed last month. I've been floating ever since. Today, someone at your kindness wall handed me a cup of tea. Didn't know my name. Didn't ask for a purchase. Just said, 'You're not alone.'" He teared up. "That's not a brand. That's a lifeline." Marcus swallowed his own tears. "Thank you," he whispered. Keanu's letter to the world. In response to the backlash, Keanu didn't issue a PR statement. He wrote a letter. Longhand. Photographed it. Posted it with no caption. It read, "To those who wonder why we do this, we do it because it's needed. In a world that commodifies people, we wanted to create a space that honors them. We're not trying to fix the world. just trying to make one room in it a little softer. KR. The letter went viral. Even critics softened, because the truth was undeniable. What was happening at Urban Soul was real. A secret long. That night, after the store closed, Marcus invited Keanu for tea. They sat in Charlie's corner, now the heart of the store. I never asked, Marcus said, but did you ever find him? Who? Charlie, the man who gave you the bagel. Keanu stared into his cup. I don't think I was supposed to. Marcus frowned. Keanu continued. I think Charlie was a moment, not a mentor. A gentle nudge to remind me that even strangers can be saviors. Marcus nodded. But there's something I haven't told you either, he said. Keanu looked up. The day you walked into the store, I just made a final decision to sell it. I was done. Burnt out. Bitter. That day was supposed to be my last shift. Keanu sat still. And then you walked in. And I treated you like dirt. They both laughed softly. And still, you didn't leave angry. You came back. Again and again. I believed in what it could be, Keanu said. And now? Marcus asked. Keanu smiled. I believe in what it is. Ignite under the light, he says. As summer approached, Urban Soul prepared for its next event. The Night of 1,000 Souls, an evening of candles lit in honor of those who'd touched our lives in small, unforgettable ways. Everyone would light a candle and write one sentence. You saw me when no one else did. The courtyard filled with flickering lights. Strangers became friends. Tears flowed. Laughter echoed. Keanu lit his candle last. He wrote, For Charlie, the man who fed my hunger and sparked a fire I'll never let go out. He placed the candle at the center. And behind him, 100 more lit the path forward. The light that never leaves. You never know when the kindness you offer will outlive you, or how far its light will travel. 5 years later, you are being soul, still standing. The sun rose slowly over Ventura Boulevard, casting warm light across familiar buildings that had stood the test of time. Among them, nestled quietly between a community cafe and a bookstore, was a storefront that hadn't lost its soul, only evolved it. Urban Soul was now more than a store. It was a landmark. The hand-carved wooden sign above the door read, Urban Soul, where strangers become stories. The boutique had expanded into a second location across town, and a third was under renovation in Chicago. But each location followed one sacred rule. No matter what we sell nothing more valuable than human dignity. Inside the original store, Charlie's corner remained. Still small, still simple, but filled with more life than ever. There were more books now, more handwritten letters, more laughter, more quiet. The kindness wall had been moved outside to invite even those who never stepped inside. And a new plaque had been added beside the door. Founded on empathy, rebuilt on humility, carried forward by love. In honor of every soul who felt invisible and stayed anyway. Narcus, a different man entirely. Marcus Langston, once a perfectionist blinded by prestige, now walked through the store with a calm, approachable presence. His style had changed, not just in clothes, but in posture, in energy. He still had the sharp eye of a fashion curator, but now he noticed people first, products second. He had become a mentor to dozens of young creatives from marginalized communities, interns, first-time stylists, formerly incarcerated artists, aspiring poets. Every Friday, he ran a group called Soul Sessions, part mentorship, part therapy circle, part creative workshop. He often told them, "This place didn't change me. The people who walked into it did, and they believed him, because they saw him." Keanu, quietly present, always giving. Keanu Reeves never gave a grand interview about the store. He never cashed out on its growth. He never took a single paycheck, but he came back often. He'd show up before the store opened, help unload boxes, sweep the entrance, rearrange books in Charlie's corner. One morning, he wrote a short note and pinned it to the corkboard inside the back office. If you're reading this, you work here, which means you're part of something rare. Don't take that lightly. Don't lose the fire. You're not in the business of clothing. You're in the business of hope. Keanu. Store eyes style coming in. A quiet girl once walked into the store with trembling hands. She had just left a psychiatric clinic after a suicide attempt. She didn't want to talk to anyone, just needed somewhere not clinical. She found Charlie's corner. She stayed 5 hours. When she left, she posted a message on the kindness wall. I was looking for a reason not to go back. I found it here. The team later learned her name was Jasmine. She returned every week. Eventually, she became a volunteer, then a full-time employee, then manager of the second location. She now trains others in trauma-informed customer service, all because she walked in once. An old letter in a new envelope. It was a regular Tuesday when Ella, now the regional director of all Urban Soul stores, received a package. Handwritten. No return address. Inside was a letter. Faded. Torn at the edges. Folded neatly. It was addressed. To the boy on the bench, if he ever finds this. Ella's hand shook as she read the first few lines. She rushed to Marcus, then to Keanu. They opened it together. The letter, from Charlie. Asterisk I. Don't know if you remember me. I met you once in a park, many years ago. You looked tired, lost, like I used to look. I gave you half a bagel. We sat in silence. You were a kid, but you looked like you'd seen too much. I've thought about you ever since. Wondered if you were okay, if you found peace, if you ever passed it on. My son found your store. Told me he walked into a place where strangers were treated like family. He said he saw your name, Keanu Reeves. I cried. Because now I know. You passed it on. You are the light now. Thank you for remembering me, even if I was just a moment in your story. Charlie asterisk. The room went silent. Keanu stared at the paper, then quietly whispered, he was real. I didn't imagine him. Marcus placed a hand on his shoulder. You became him. The Soul Gathering. 5 years strong. Every year, on the anniversary of Urban Soul's rebirth, they host the Soul Gathering. Thousands attend now, some in person, others virtually. The event features music, storytelling, live murals, and a massive screen projecting live messages from people around the world. I was lost. I walked in. Now I'm studying to be a counselor. You told me I mattered. No one else ever had. I'm 68. This is the first store where I was treated like I still have value. And one from a 10-year-old boy. I gave my lunch to a man who was cold. He cried. I told him, my mom says everyone needs a soul place. The final. As the gathering wound down that evening, Keanu walked over to the kindness wall. He stared at it for a long time. Then, quietly, he picked up a pen, wrote one last tile, hung it in the center. It read, to anyone who feels invisible, I was you, and you are seen. You are loved. Keep going. Keanu Reeves. As he stepped back, the crowd grew quiet. Then, as if on cue, someone began to clap. Then another, and another. It wasn't just applause. It was gratitude. Lee J.C. Urban Soul became a teaching case at business schools, not for its profit model, but for its people model. Documentaries were made. Leaders visited, but the soul of the place remained the same. No one ever paid to sit in Charlie's corner. No one ever left without being told they mattered. And long after the lights dimmed, the mission continued. Kindness is scalable. Compassion is a strategy. And sometimes, changing one person's day changes the world.